He called me from the airport. That was the last thing I expected on a random Wednesday afternoon in March. Not "I'm leaving you." Not "we need to talk." Just a phone call, casual as if he was checking in from a work trip, telling me he wouldn't be coming home. "I think we've run our course," he said. I remember standing in our kitchen, holding a dish towel. I had just finished washing the lunch plates. The sun was coming through the window over the sink, that pale afternoon light that made everything look soft and ordinary. I kept staring at a water stain on the counter while his voice came through the phone like it was traveling from somewhere much farther away than the airport. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means I'm done. I've been done for a while." I didn't cry. I think I was too confused to cry. 7 years. We had been together for 7 years. Married for 5 of them. We had a house in Raleigh with a new roof we had just paid $12,000 to replace. We had a dog named Biscuit. We had a joint checking account and a shared Netflix password, and a couple's massage appointment scheduled for the following Saturday. "Where are you going?" I asked. He paused. "I'll figure it out." He hung up before I could say anything else. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. The dish towel was still in my hands. Biscuit was asleep on the couch in the other room. The refrigerator hummed. Everything in the house looked exactly the same as it had 20 minutes ago, and yet nothing felt like it belonged to me anymore. That night, I called my sister. She drove 2 hours from Charlotte and showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and her overnight bag without me even asking. That was the kind of person she was. I didn't have to explain everything right away. We just sat on the back porch and I talked when I could, and when I couldn't, she just sat there with me. She didn't push. "Did he say why?" she asked at some point. "No. He said we ran our course." She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. 7 years and that's the explanation you get? That was the thing I kept coming back to. 7 years. Half of our 20s. The move from Atlanta to Raleigh when he got the new job. The miscarriage we got through together. Or at least I thought we got through it together. The nights I stayed up late, helping him practice for presentations. The birthday parties his family stopped inviting me to, and I pretended not to notice. His name was Seth. I had met him at a friend's birthday cookout in Buckhead when I was 26. He was the one who brought the good beer, which was already a point in his favor. He was funny in that dry, quiet way that you had to pay attention to catch. He asked for my number and actually texted me the same night, which I thought was either very confident or a little too eager, but I liked him anyway. I should have paid more attention to the signs. I know that now. About 8 months before the phone call, things had started to feel different, not dramatically different. Not in a way I could point to and say, "Look, something is wrong." Just a gradual cooling. He started going to the gym before work instead of on weekends, which meant I stopped seeing him in the mornings. He started keeping his phone on silent, not face down on the table like some dramatic tell, just always on silent, always in his pocket, which felt like a minor shift but added up over time to a wall I couldn't see past. He stopped asking about my day. Not overnight. Slowly, the way a plant dries out when you forget to water it. You don't notice until the leaves start dropping. I mentioned it to my coworker, Patrice, once, half joking, trying to make it lighter than it felt. She gave me a look that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite concern, just a look that said, "I hear what you're saying under what you're saying." I didn't ask her to say more. I wasn't ready. I told myself he was stressed. His company had been through 2 rounds of layoffs and he survived both of them, but it changed something in him, made him quieter in a way that felt less like introversion and more like absence. I gave him room. I backed off. I stopped pushing him to talk. That was the thing I thought a good partner did. You gave people space when they needed it. I gave him so much space he disappeared into it. After the phone call, I gave him a week to reach out. He didn't. I texted once and asked if we could talk, and he responded with a single sentence. "I think it's better if we handle everything through lawyers." Lawyers. We hadn't even had an actual conversation, and he was already talking about lawyers. That sentence changed something in me. I called my friend, Gwen, who had gone through a divorce 3 years earlier, and come out the other side sharper and calmer and more herself than I had ever seen her. She told me the first thing to do was not panic, and the second thing to do was call a family law attorney before I did anything else. Before I moved money, before I signed anything, before I talked to him again. Don't let the shock make you passive, she said. This is the moment where you protect yourself. I found an attorney named Carol who had an office downtown and a manner that was both warm and absolutely no nonsense. She sat across from me with a legal pad and asked questions I hadn't thought to ask myself. When had the joint accounts been opened? Whether either of us had separate accounts she didn't know about. Whether there was a prenuptial agreement, there wasn't. Whether there were any business interests, investments, retirement accounts. We had a joint savings account and separate 401ks. The house was in both our names. We had one car each. On paper, it sounded simple. Carol told me not to assume anything about what simple meant in practice. Has he made any large transfers or withdrawals recently? She asked. I didn't know. I hadn't checked. I went home and logged into our bank account for the first time in probably 3 months. Seth had always handled the day-to-day finances. Not because I wasn't capable. I had my own income. I was an occupational therapist, and I made decent money. But we had fallen into a pattern early on where he paid the bills from the joint account, and I transferred my contribution each month and didn't look too closely at the rest. I trusted him. I should have looked. Over the past 6 months, there had been 11 cash withdrawals. Not enormous amounts individually, but together they added up to almost $19,000. Some were ATM withdrawals. Some were marked as transfers to an account I didn't recognize. The pattern was too consistent to be random. Every 2 to 3 weeks. Never the same amount twice, as if someone had been careful about that. I sat at the kitchen table for a very long time. Then I printed every statement going back 2 years, put them in a folder, and brought them to Carol the next morning. She looked at them carefully and didn't react dramatically, which told me she had seen this before. We're going to need a forensic accountant, she said. And in the meantime, I'm going to recommend you open a separate account today and move your direct deposit. I did both. I was still in that numb, mechanically functioning phase. Wake up, take Biscuit on a walk, go to work, see my patients, come home, eat something I didn't taste, sleep badly, repeat. My sister called every 2 days. Gwen texted every couple of days to check in without making it feel like checking in. I was held up by people who didn't ask for anything in return, and I tried to remember that even when everything else felt like it was dissolving. Seth and I didn't speak. He had apparently gone to Stace with someone, though I didn't know who. He'd had a close friend in Charlotte named Brett that I never particularly warmed to, and I assumed maybe it was there. Or maybe it was someone else. I didn't let myself think too hard about what someone else might mean. Then came the day I had to go back to the house for the dog's vet records. Biscuit had been with me at my sister's for 2 weeks by then, staying there while I figured out what to do about the house. He had a routine vet appointment coming up, and the shot records were in a file drawer in the home office. Seth knew this. I texted him and told him I would be stopping by on Thursday afternoon to get a few things. He didn't respond. I drove over on my lunch break. The neighborhood looked the same as always, that quiet street where everyone kept their yards neat and waved when you drove past. I pulled into the driveway. His car wasn't there, which I had expected. But there was another car parked at the curb I didn't recognize. A white SUV, North Carolina plates. I told myself it was probably a neighbor's guest. Maybe someone working on the house next door. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled different, not bad. Just different. A different soap, maybe. Or a different candle. Something floral and unfamiliar that sat in the air like an imprint of another person's preferences. I noticed it immediately and then told myself I was imagining it. I went straight to the office and found the file drawer. I was flipping through folders looking for the vet records when I heard the back door open. I heard footsteps in the kitchen. Then a sound I will not be able to unhear for a very long time. A woman's voice, humming to herself. Comfortable. Unbothered. like someone who had been coming and going from this house long enough not to think about it. I stepped into the hallway. She walked out of the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee and stopped when she saw me. She was younger than me. Maybe late 20s. She had the kind of casual confidence that comes from not expecting any resistance. She was wearing a long cardigan I had never seen before and what I recognized, with a slow, sickening clarity, as one of Seth's college t-shirts underneath it. An old Duke shirt, navy blue with a faded logo, the one he always wore on lazy Sundays. She stared at me. I stared at her. Neither of us said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then she set both mugs down on the entryway table very slowly, like someone making deliberate movements around something dangerous. "He said you weren't coming until later," she finally said. I almost didn't register the sentence at first. Then the full meaning of it settled in. He had told her I was coming. He had given her a schedule. He had factored me into the logistics of whatever this was, which meant this wasn't new information to her, which meant she had been here long enough that my presence in my own house required coordination. "I changed my mind," I said. My voice was very calm. I didn't plan for it to be. It just came out that way. The way your body sometimes handles things your brain hasn't caught up to yet. She picked up her mug again and held it with both hands and looked toward the back of the house, like she was waiting for someone to come rescue her from this moment. No one came. "How long?" I asked. She looked at me. "How long have you been coming here?" She shook her head slightly. Not a denial. More like someone deciding how much to give up. "You should ask him that. I'm asking you." She looked down at her mug. "A while," she said. Then she put the coffee down on the table again, and she went back into the kitchen, and I heard her gathering her things. Keys, bag, jacket, the sounds of an exit being assembled. She came back through the hall with her purse over her shoulder, and she looked at me once more. Something uncertain in her face, not quite guilt, and not quite apology, and then she left through the front door. The house was quiet. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I looked around with different eyes. The extra mug in the dish rack, a half-finished book on the coffee table that I had never seen before, a phone charger plugged into the outlet by the couch, not Seth's brand, a jacket hanging on the hook by the door that wasn't his and wasn't mine. Small things. The kind of things you might not notice if you weren't standing still and looking at all of them at once. I went back to the home office. That was when I saw the folder on the desk. Seth had always been organized. He had a system for everything, labeled folders and color-coded tabs and a specific drawer for every category of document. This folder was out on the desk, which was unusual. I opened it. Inside were printed emails, bank statements I didn't have access to, a document from what appeared to be a real estate company, a purchase agreement for a condo in Cary, dated 4 months ago, in his name only. Another document that looked like a personal loan, also in his name, also from about 6 months ago. Notes handwritten on a legal pad with numbers I didn't fully understand. But the words transfer, asset, rollover appeared in several places. He hadn't woken up one day and decided he was done. He had spent the better part of a year building an exit. While I was driving to work and caring for our dog and telling myself he was stressed, he had been quietly constructing a separate life, a separate account, a separate address, a financial structure that would make him a much harder target in a divorce proceeding. The condo in Cary was already his. He had probably been staying there, not at Brett's. The woman who just walked out of my house might have even helped him find it. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. I took out my phone and photographed every page in the folder, every email, every statement, every line of handwritten notes. Then I put the folder back exactly as I had found it, took Biscuit's vet records from the file drawer, and walked out of the house. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes, not crying, just breathing, watching the white SUV that had come back to the curb when I wasn't paying attention. Then I called Carol. She picked up on the second ring and I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment, the efficient kind of quiet, and then she said, "Send me the photos tonight. I'm going to bring in the forensic accountant first thing tomorrow." "Okay," I said. Are you all right? I thought about that. I think so, I said. I'm not sad anymore. I think that's the part that surprised me. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. That's usually when women start winning, she said. The following weeks were not quiet or easy, but they had a direction to them that the first weeks hadn't. The forensic accountant, a precise and methodical woman named Dr. Ellison, went through every account and transaction going back 3 years. What she found was more thorough than I had expected. The $19,000 in withdrawals was only part of it. There had also been an undisclosed investment account he had opened shortly after we got married, funded by small transfers that never crossed a threshold that would trigger reporting. By the time we had the full picture, the number was closer to $42,000 in assets he had attempted to move outside the marital estate. Carol filed immediately. Seth's attorney called 3 days later, sounding notably less confident than Seth had probably hoped. The framing of him as the straightforward party who simply wanted to move on had become difficult to maintain once the forensic report was in hand. I didn't enjoy any of it in the way I thought I would. I had expected something like satisfaction, that cinematic moment where the villain sees the evidence and realizes the game is up. What I actually felt was tired. Tired, and also underneath that, something quieter, a kind of clarity. This was who he had been for the last year of our marriage, possibly longer. Not just someone falling out of love, which I could have understood, which I could have grieved cleanly, but someone who had looked at 7 years and decided that what he owed me was nothing, and had set about protecting himself at my expense with careful and deliberate effort. The phone call from the airport, which had felt so sudden and brutal, hadn't been impulsive at all. It had been the last step of a plan. He had called me when everything was already in place. That understanding didn't make me angrier. It made things simpler. The divorce was finalized 8 months later. I kept the house, at least for a year, with the option to sell and split proceeds once I was ready. A portion of the concealed assets was recovered and allocated to the settlement. It wasn't everything, but it was enough, and more importantly, it was documented and real, and could not be revised by whatever story he chose to tell people. The woman with the white SUV was still in the picture, from what I heard through mutual friends. Someone asked me once how I felt about that. I thought about it for a second and then said, honestly, that I hoped it worked out for her. Because a man who plans his exit, that carefully usually does it more than once. I moved Biscuit back into the house. I repainted the bedroom a color I had wanted for years, but he hadn't liked. I had dinner with my sister more often. I started running again, something I had stopped doing in the early years of the marriage, without really noticing when. I went back to therapy. Not crisis therapy, but the kind where you sit with a person once a week and slowly take stock of who you became while you weren't paying attention. My therapist asked me once what I would say to myself on the day of the phone call, if I could go back. I thought about it for a while. Then I said, don't panic. Make copies. Call the right people. The grief will come when it comes, but don't let the shock make you forget that you have options. Because here is what I know now that I didn't know standing in my kitchen, holding a dish towel while my marriage ended over a phone call. The moment something breaks is not the moment you lose. It only feels that way. The real loss would have been letting the shock make me small. Letting him tell a story where I was the woman who just accepted what happened and handed things over and quietly disappeared. He thought leaving first meant he got to define everything that followed. He was wrong about that. I had survived the kind of betrayal that doesn't announce itself loudly. The slow, patient kind, built in the background of a life I thought we were building together. And the thing about surviving something like that is that you come out of it knowing exactly what you are made of. Not what you hoped you were made of. What you actually are. The man who called from the airport thought he was ending my story. He was only ending his chapter in it.